Have the
My
Americans
pleasure.
closed the door to diplomacy by sanctioning Zarif?
Well, very much so. I think this really puts the incoherence of the Trump administration's Iran policy on full display in the sense that they constantly talk about interest in diplomacy with Iran and in negotiations with Iran, but turn around and sanctions Iran diplomat in chief. Or they say that Foreign Minister Zarif is important enough to be sanctioned, but he's not important enough to be an interlocutor for Washington. And unfortunately, I think this move really renders any kind of serious negotiations between this administration and the Iranian government much more difficult.
Now, Washington says Mohammad Javad Zarif isn't the one calling the shots in Iran. That statement is not incorrect, if you will. Is it possible that Washington can negotiate with someone higher up in the food chain?
Look, I think even in the U.S. system, Secretary Pompeo cannot make decisions on his own. He follows basically the marching orders that he gets from the president. The same applies in the Iranian system. And the reality is that the Americans can't decide who would be their interlocutor on the Iranian side, in the same way that the U.S. government would never accept the Iranians determining who they are willing to talk to or not to engage with. And I really think this was a very counterproductive move.
Now, the Europeans say they will continue to work with Mohammad Javad Zarif despite the sanctions from Washington. How effective, in your opinion, has Europe been in trying to salvage a nuclear deal?
Well, the Europeans have tried very, very hard. So far, they haven't been effective enough because the U.S. sanctions are just so powerful, and the European private sector has so much interest in the U.S. financial system that is just not willing to take the risk. There are still ways of trying to salvage the agreement. I think the Europeans can inject export credit into the banking channel that they have established, and more European countries can join it. But this doesn't take away from the fact that the Europeans believe in diplomacy and multilateralism. I think they will continue to engage with Foreign Minister Zarif, and every time they do so, they will be defying U.S. sanctions. And that's another reason why this measure by the Trump administration was extremely short-sighted.
Now, you said that the United States has essentially shut the door to diplomacy by sanctioning Zarif. How do we scale back from where we are right now with these high tensions between the two sides?
Well, now I think the role of a mediator is more important than ever. President Macron has started an initiative to try to mediate between the two sides and basically put into action some kind of a tactical détente, some sort of de-escalation that would not necessarily result in a better or broader agreement, but at least would stop this cycle of escalation that could eventually move the parties towards a military confrontation that no one really wants, but it's becoming more and more inevitable at this stage.
Now, Hassan Rouhani says Iran is ready for the worst as it tries to salvage the nuclear agreement. What is he talking about? What's the worst?
Well, I think he means, an economic warfare that is now almost bordering on military confrontation between the two countries. And he's saying that Iran is prepared for the worst case scenario. And the reality is that the only thing that poses an existential threat to the Islamic Republic is a land invasion that is just not simply in the cards. The U.S. would need 1 million troops to invade Iran. So that means that whatever military confrontation would happen is likely to leave the regime in place, which means that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.